Hello, everyone, and welcome to Florida Pulse, where we take a close look at some of the issues affecting us here in the Sunshine State. I'm Florida Today engagement editor John A. Torres, and welcome. Today, we will be chatting about construction, new homes, labor shortages, and all that kind of stuff. Joining me today are Florida Today business editor Dave BERMAN, Clayton Park, the business editor at the Daytona Beach News Journal, Melissa BYERS, the business liaison and apprenticeship navigator for CareerSource Brevard, and Mike Jaffe, whose business card must be very, very large because he serves as the Director of Operations for the East Central Florida Division of Christopher Allen Homes, and he's the first Vice President of the Home and Builders Contractors Association of the Space Coast. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for doing this. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's just get right to it. Mike, I'd like to start with you. I see a lot of projects along State Road A1A that seem to pause every so often. What is the impact of labor and material shortages on the time it may take to build, say, like a single-family home?
The impact labor shortage has on a single-family home, it can be different than a commercial project or a multifamily project. As of recently, we've seen, because some of the demand is slowed for new homes, that labor is freed up. But we're also seeing the type of labor that's becoming available in the market is not as skilled as it once was before.
You talked about the labor shortage. Clayton, I know that you've researched this a little bit. The history of the labor shortage in the construction sector, how far back does the problem date?
Well, according to the economists that I interviewed, it dates back to actually the ending of the Great Recession back in 2009. During the Great Recession, we saw large number of, we saw construction projects grind to a halt in our area here in the Daytona Beach area. And that was a trend that was occurring throughout the country. And according to economists, the large numbers of construction workers chose that time to switch fields, and many went back to school or got work in other fields. And so when building started rebounding, a lot of these people that had been employed by them before didn't come back.
Interesting. Okay, and I have one for you, Melissa. So we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country here in Florida. What kind of obstacle is that for trying to recruit workers?
So it is an obstacle. Part of it does look at other ways. So we're looking at like underserved communities, looking at those who are maybe in career transitionals. You have to look at military who are getting ready to transition out. So it's not about just who's out there and the unemployed rate, but we got to look at those who are maybe just not being recorded in the unemployed number, right? So there are some who just never went back to work after the pandemic that we're not hitting. There's some who've started businesses. There's a lot of data that we can pull and that we have pulled. And I know that we were just speaking on some of these numbers, and it's funny because our labor force actually has gone up even before pre-pandemic. So we do have a lot in the labor force because we are sitting here in Brevard County at a 57.24% in the labor force, where before we were sitting at 56.43%. So we're still gaining people into the labor. It's just a matter of where they're going and how much they're producing. And also, I know we talked about some skills, and we are seeing a lot more of our youth going into construction pathways. So that's going to take some time to catch up with us as well, as, you know, the age being 16 before you can get into the workforce. So, I mean, it's going to take some time.
I want to follow up with you here, Melissa, and stay with you for a second. Some of the younger people today, they seem like they don't want to start out on the bottom and work their way up. In construction, there are a lot of sort of like menial type jobs at the bottom. You have laborers, you have people that install insulation in very hot attics. What can you do? How do you recruit for that? How do you try to get around that or explain to them that, you know, it'll get better, you'll make more money eventually?
I think right now it's really getting employers to go into those classrooms and talk with those students and getting them to understand that within construction, moving up in the field is one of the fastest, right? So you have the ability to gain your skills and your knowledge faster than if you're just going to go to regular college or if you're out in the nursing world. I mean, this is a skilled trade that you learn by using your hands, by gaining knowledge, by just doing. So yeah, you may have to go do that for a little bit. And that's what I tell them too. You're going to do it for just a little amount of time. It could be 6 months, but within that 6 months, you're going to advance and move forward and make more money. And you're not going to have to do that possibly again, or that may not be the thing you're going to do daily. So I think it's a matter of just really talking to them and educating them on what this career path is going to look like.
If I can interject as well, you're absolutely correct that the labor force has been growing. But the one thing, when you look at that statistic all by itself, that doesn't necessarily tell the entire story. Florida's population has been growing at a faster rate than the labor force has been growing. This past year, according to the Census Bureau, we've heard for many years, though, Florida attracts 1,000 newcomers a day on average, and some years we've done that, but in 2021, for instance, we didn't do that. It was more in the 600, 700 person range a day. But last year, we actually did attract, our state attracted more than an average of more than 1,100 a day. The problem is that the labor force can be growing, but if the need for housing grows at a faster rate, that's where we've got a problem. And from the people that I talk to, including builders, developers, and economists, that's exactly the case for Florida. In the Daytona Beach area, for instance, we're drawing large numbers of retirees or people about to retire, thanks to the increase in 55 and older communities. So again, while the labor force numbers are growing, not at the rate of the need for more housing.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for that. Dave, will you follow up on this? I know that you looked at a survey by the Associate General Contractors, and you found some startling findings about problems in filling these construction jobs. What are some of the things you found?
Right. They did a national survey and also a survey specific about Florida. And they found in Florida companies, 93% of all companies had trouble filling craft positions, which work on the construction sites specifically. And the main reason they found that they couldn't fill these jobs were that the people were not really as qualified as they were looking for. Either they didn't have the skills or didn't want to learn the skills, and they just weren't cut out for the job. They didn't want to work out in the field on a hot construction site, like on a roof or in an attic. And other people even couldn't pass a drug test. So it was difficult. They found very difficult to fill these jobs. And the jobs that they filled, the people that were leaving the positions maybe had 20 to 30 years of experience. So when the new people came on board, of course, they couldn't, even if they were enthusiastic about the job, they couldn't really do it as quickly. So the jobs were taking much longer to complete because you have people in their first year of working versus somebody that's been on the job 20 years and knew exactly what they were doing. So the time to take to build a house was getting much longer.
I just want to follow up on that with Mike. Lots of older, more experienced construction workers are retiring. Are there enough people coming in, to eventually replace them?
I don't think so. I do know my experience, though, the more experienced builders will find a way to get the job done, whether it's through technology or pony up the money for on-the-job training with the unskilled workers, or utilizing multiple subcontracting groups to complete the same trade. My experience, the national home builders, are the ones that are soaking up the majority of the labor, and the custom and semi-production or spec home builders have a hard time filling the labor because the national builders are, have more volume. They pay their bills weekly. The margins are lower, but it allows for better cash flow for the smaller subcontractors to operate.
Great. Now, Clayton, oh, I'm sorry, you have something to add, Melissa?
Yeah, actually, so I know that he was saying that jobs, as far as you can't really replace a person, right? So somebody who's extremely skilled and who's going to leave the workforce, you can't. So a job actually tailors to a person, and we take our jobs and we make them our own when we're there, right? So somebody who's been there 20 years, of course, you can't replace that person with somebody who's brand new coming in, because they are only going to have maybe 2 days on the job versus somebody who was there 20 years, right? Their skills are going to be marginally different. However, there are ways like apprenticeship. Apprenticeship is major right now, and apprenticeship is very, very, very growing in Florida alone, and the governor has a push for that. But that gives you skills, that gives them wages, that gives them training, and it really does build your workforce, and it allows for them to stay with you. It's growth, it's rewarding to the not just the employer, but to the individual themselves. So we have seen a lot of success there. And we know that trades started that apprenticeship way back in the day, and we're going to continue to see that happen here.
Great. And I'm sorry, are our local high schools involved in that?
We do have some local high schools with the CTE program, so Career and Tech Ed, that do building construction technologies. And then they also have an air conditioning one. And I believe that our local BYERS high school will be getting a carpentry program. All of them can be converted into a pre-apprentice that can flow straight into an apprenticeship program. However, we don't house apprenticeships for all of those trades. We are working on getting those done. Myself and our local state representative, we work together for apprenticeship to do that, because that obviously helps, build the workforce.
Clayton, we have this labor shortage, right? We have a backlog on materials as well. But Florida was hit with 2 devastating hurricanes in the last 2 years. What effect has that had on our construction industry? As I'm sure that in addition to new homes being built, there were lots of repairs that had to be done because of the hurricanes.
And it was 2 hurricanes in the span of 45 days last fall, so not even quite a year ago. Well, that basically just accelerated the problem, because you've got builders that are behind on struggling to complete their projects on time, and then all of a sudden you had this enormous need for all these workers to immediately jump over and try to help on repairs of existing homes and businesses, etc. So yeah, no, I mean the hurricanes did not help, that's for sure.
And Dave, we haven't spoken a lot yet about the supply shortages, but what are some of the things that the builders are doing to try to get around these, and what supplies are in most demand?
Right. There has been a big supply shortage because of started out during the pandemic, where construction companies could not really get the supply shipped to them, and now that's easing a little bit, but there's still occasional differences in the supply and demand. So a whole range of items: windows, appliances, air conditioners, cabinets, you name it. There's been shortages that builders are experiencing. And one thing that they're trying to do is to order materials way before they used to, so that hopefully they'll get to the site by the time the builder is ready to put the windows in or install the air conditioning system. But another thing they're doing, if the supplies are not there, they might sub out other types of appliances that the customer didn't order temporarily, just so they have a washing machine or a dishwasher that they could use, move in their house, and then when the part that they ordered actually gets there, the builder will come in and replace the old one with the new ones. And they're even doing it with windows, for example, or cabinets, where it's not as efficient, but they want to complete the house and get the customer into the house and get the rest of their money for their construction job. So they have to take these convoluted steps to get the house completed and get the customer into being able to move in.
And to just follow up on that with Mike, we were having a pergola built in the backyard last year. You may have maybe 18 months or so ago, and we had to hold off because the price of lumber had like skyrocketed. What affects that, the price of lumber, and has it gone down?
I think a lot of it was just simple supply and demand. And then they shut a few lumber mills down during COVID, and actually 2 large lumber mills caught on fire and burnt down, which caused a huge shortage. But fortunately, lumber is back down to like pre-COVID pricing, but concrete is almost double. So I'm seeing concrete nearly $200 a yard, when a year ago it was sub $100 a yard.
Wow, that's a lot of money for concrete. Wow.
Very much so. Very much so.
And anybody can answer this. What are all these things that we're talking about? How is this affecting the price of a new, simple, single-family home, let's say? Nothing extravagant, just a regular starter home.
I think number one, I think it's changing the way builders do business, but I've seen it affect the price of a home from 20 to 30%. But simple things that like builders have done is they've talked about pre-procured materials or standardizing windows. Like we use one window size for all of our houses, and we stock 50 homes at a time. And then also like just getting super efficient on the floor plan. But some of the custom home builders or their larger commercial jobs were nothing standard. Those guys are still suffering the woes of the supply shortage and procurement issues.
So, Mike, you're saying 20% to 30%. So even at 20%, a $300,000 house would become $360,000 to $60,000 increase just for the same house without any, and that's just pretty much a basic house. So that's a pretty startling increase as far as what the home buyer is looking at, even not putting in big frills to the house. And oceanside house, of course, would be much higher price point. So it could be a $100,000 increase for some houses.
That's right.
Wow. And you, Melissa, you have your finger on the pulse. Do you see what I just did there? On the pulse of this industry and the workers. What is the outlook, do you think, for these construction jobs? I mean, are we going to have some relief soon? Are enough people, going for these apprenticeship jobs or apprenticeship programs or training and all that?
I mean, I think so. We also get grant money too. So I know you guys touched on hurricanes, and we do get hurricane grant funding. And we actually have one where we're doing carpentry that help with the cities and parks and so forth. But I think that individuals are learning that apprenticeship is the pathway to go. And I think that they're seeing a real big picture, right? Because they're not getting a lot of debt. So what people have to understand is with apprenticeship, the students the apprentice are not getting charged that tuition. So they're getting out of high school with some knowledge already from taking these career and tech ed. So why not continue that pathway where they're not going to accrue debt and keep going into further debt? Because you do as you get out of the house or if you can get out of the house and you start to get college and books and all these things. But when you go this route, you don't, and you're gaining a wage. And we know how important that is right now. Not just to earn money, but we know how important it is for those employers to gain these employees. So I think as long as we keep educating, not just the students who would become employees, but we need to educate the employers and the workforce, because it does take an entire community. It's not just, these employers over here and this high school over here. It's really everybody coming together to kind of fix these problems.
Right, gotcha. And just a follow-up to that with either you, Melissa, or Clayton, when fast food workers are now, possibly making $17 an hour, what does that do to the wages in our construction industry?
But fast food worker is not necessarily a career path. Where are they going to go? They're going to sit there and just serve you a burger, and then that's great. But with construction, they're going to what? They're going to learn more trades, and they can gain and go, and they can become a project manager. They can own their own business later. I mean, it's a pathway and a gateway that opens up to so much more, right? So it's going to take shorter time for them as well, too, because again, it's something that you do with your hands. It's a skill set that you're obtaining by doing, and your time frame is much shorter than those who even spend time in college for 4 years and then go into the business world, who have to wait maybe a year and a half for somebody else to leave before they can move up a ladder. It's a very different type of career pathway. And so we are working on building that kind of viewpoint. Right now, I'm working on some subcommittees to try to do that so we can map it out and then present it and show it. So I think it's really important for us to have that.
Well, you know, you say that it's not a career path in fast food, but I just interviewed a Chick-fil-A franchisee who got to start working at Chick-fil-A in Ormond Beach at age 16 and then became a manager and then became a franchisee. So it's not, I mean, you can say that, but you could make that argument for a lot of things, including construction. And one of the problems is that when you've got like places like Buc-ee's offering starting wages at $17 an hour, that makes it a challenge, especially when in construction, you know, you've got people that are working outdoors in the blistering heat. So it is a challenge. What I'm hearing from builders in the Daytona Beach area is that they are raising their starting wages. And yes, absolutely, they see apprenticeship and trying to do more efforts to try to encourage young people to consider careers in construction is a critical piece of the component. Another thing that economists touched on, brought up, two different economists that I spoke with, to my surprise, was that they both saw immigration as a key to the solving this labor shortage, particularly for construction. And one of the reasons that they said that was, in addition to what we had discussed, a lot of the skilled workers in the trades are baby boomers. They're one of the people that's been helping us with our kitchen remodel. He's 70 years old. He's been working 7 days a week, basically, because he can still do it. But you know, it's become hard for him to squeeze in time with us. But as people like him decide to finally give it up, I mean, that is a challenge to get these younger people to be willing to take their place, especially when they have other options that pay as well or close to well, but maybe under more pleasant working conditions.
But I would like to say that, yes, you could go get 17 maybe working at fast food, but it might take a little bit longer to make more than that 17. It's not going to be 6 months from there, most likely. And if you do promote to a manager, that's fantastic. And I think that's great. But within construction and in the trades, you have so much more you can gain out of it. I think that there's a lot more to learn, a lot more to offer. And I'm not saying that there isn't necessarily like a career, like you said, you could become a franchisee for these places. But again, it's going to take a little bit longer of a pathway because there's only going to be one owner into that. Where in construction, you have a lot of different paths and different things you can learn and gain knowledge of, and little industry focuses that you could go into. So I think there's a lot more to gain from it necessarily than just going into the niche of fast food or going into the niche of this direction, where construction opened those doors for a lot of different ways.
But again, what these economists are saying is that they don't see an end to this construction labor shortage for the construction industry possibly until the early 2030s. And again, part of it is demographics. And again, this is not just Florida, this is happening nationally. But in Florida, we've got the additional challenge of the recent passage of SB 1718, which enacted some of the most strict immigration laws in the country. And I've got people that have told me, I had one employer recently, just last week, tell me that he lost 15 workers immediately when that was passed, even though he had papers for all his workers and they were all legal, but they were concerned about their family members. So he said that he knew for a fact that those people left Florida for other states. And when I go onto construction job sites, which I do quite often for my work. I mean, I don't trespass, but you know, I drive by and I walk around the perimeter and take photos and shoot video. By and large, there's a lot of people that are Spanish speaking. And again, I'm not saying any of them are illegal, but that is a concern, and I've heard that from builders as well.
Well, I just want to touch base on just a few things. We do use Lightcast here, which is a labor market data information, and I did pull some before I came here. I just want you to know that there is a gap between expected and actual employment, and we do have a 12% projected growth here in Brevard County from 2022 to 27, but over the next 5 years. So really, we're looking at a 5-year issue, not necessarily till 2030 for our construction-focused industry.
Well, again, one of the economists I spoke with was Ron Hetrick of Lightcast.
Yeah, and I know Ron.
And he's the one that said early 2030s at the earliest.
He's
unless we can
nationally
do something.
looking at it.
But that's what he told me. But he said one way to possibly speed that up is if we can find more pathways for these people that cross into our borders to become legal to work. And ultimately to become citizens. But he saw that it seemed like what we've been doing is kind of the opposite.
Oh, great conversation, guys. Mike, can you just add to this a little bit? What are you seeing, because you're on the front lines, what are you seeing as the most difficult jobs to fill on a construction site? Is it the manager? Is it the electricians? Or what do we need?
My experience is surveyors, and it was a couple of years ago. They changed the requirement to become a surveyor. You have to have a four-year degree, bachelor degree, and 4 years experience before you can actually become a licensed surveyor. So I'm seeing survey lead times right now 6 weeks or more, and that's calling every surveyor in town. And behind that is carpenters, from millwork to cabinetry. And further there to electricians. And with the growing demand for like EV technology, a lot of these big suppliers that produce transformers are losing their labor force to the EV market now.
We're almost out of time here, but Dave Berman, my pal there, I want to ask you to say the final word here. What's the outlook here? What's the prognosis? I'm hearing possible 2030s, for our labor shortage. But what do you see overall for the industry? What do you expect to see in the next few years?
Well, I think the supply shortage might continue to get a little better. I think the labor shortage will still be around for a little while. The Commerce Department does a outlook for every industry in this state, and it shows that construction is going to be one of the fastest growing industries for the demand for workers. It's going to be 11% more workers needed by 2030. And that's the highest of any industry except for healthcare, which is not surprising in Florida with the demand for healthcare. And construction is continuing to be in demand both from commercial and residential projects. People are still moving into the state. So I think it'll be a while before we even out on the demand versus the supply of workers, and the general public looking to buy a house might have to expect to longer delays in getting the house built for a little while at least.
Well, there you have it. A great conversation about this whole topic. I want to thank our guests, Dave Berman, Clayton Park, Mike Jaffe, and Melissa Byers. This has been an episode of Florida Pulse. I'm John Torres, your host, and we'll see you next time.